That old horse barn is a fire hazard. That's what Vanessa Holloway said 3 days before half the hills behind Willow Creek went up in flames. At 1:12 a.m., the smell of burning cedar hit my porch before the first evacuation siren even started. I stepped outside and saw orange light rolling across the ridgeline like a storm moving through dry grass. Horses inside my barn slammed their stalls hard enough to shake the metal gates while ash drifted through the air like grey snow. Meanwhile, the HOA Facebook group was still arguing about my unsightly rural structure lowering property values. Funny thing is, that same barn had a 12,000-gallon gravity-fed water tank buried underneath it since 1987. My father installed it after the Black Ridge fire nearly wiped this valley out. Vanessa knew about the tank too. Last month, she tried filing county paperwork to force me to remove it for violating subdivision aesthetics. Then the wind changed direction. By 1:40 a.m., traffic on Willow Creek Drive had completely stopped. Luxury SUVs clogged both lanes while smoke rolled low across the subdivision so thick it blurred the streetlights into orange smears. I was opening the north irrigation trench when 2 county deputies pulled into my gravel entrance asking if my ranch could serve as a temporary shelter zone. That was the first time anyone from the county had stepped onto my property in months. Funny how fast people rediscover land rights when flames hit 500 acres. Then Vanessa showed up wearing designer boots covered in ash, clutching a stack of HOA violation folders against her chest like they still mattered. She started yelling about liability exposure and unauthorized livestock structures while embers floated onto her sleeves. One of the deputies looked at her like she had completely lost her mind. Then he asked me a question that made my stomach tighten instantly. "Mr. Walker, why is your fire break missing on the East Hill?" "Because Vanessa had it bulldozed 6 weeks earlier." The words came out before she could stop me. One deputy turned slowly toward her while the other swept his flashlight across the east ridge where the fire was now moving fast through dry brush. You could still see fresh dirt lines where the original trench used to cut across the hill. Vanessa immediately started talking over me, claiming the trench violated updated landscaping codes and created erosion concerns for nearby homes. That would have sounded convincing if I did not still have the county denial letter folded inside my truck. See, I filed an objection the same day her contractors filled the trench with gravel and decorative shrubs. The county inspector flagged it as unsafe removal of an existing wildfire barrier. But somehow the complaint vanished from the system 3 days later. The deputy asked who approved the removal permit. Vanessa opened her mouth to answer just as a firefighter sprinted over yelling that the eastern slope had completely lost containment. The fire crossed the eastern ridge in less than 10 minutes. Dry ornamental grass around the subdivision entrance lit up first, then the cedar fencing behind the clubhouse started throwing sparks across backyards like fireworks. People abandoned cars in the middle of the street and ran carrying pets, laptops, whatever they could grab. I stayed at the control valve beside the barn, opening the secondary irrigation lines my father buried decades ago under the north pasture. Water surged through steel pipes with a deep metallic groan, flooding the old trench network Vanessa had tried to erase. That is when the county fire captain finally arrived. He stepped out covered in soot, took one look at the flowing trenches, and asked who engineered the system. Vanessa immediately claimed the HOA maintained all wildfire protections in the subdivision. Bad move. The captain stared at her for a second, then held up a folded document pulled from his truck. It was my original fire mitigation plan with my family name stamped across every page. The captain flipped through the pages under his flashlight while embers blew across the pasture behind us. My father filed that mitigation plan with the county in 1989 after a brush fire nearly trapped 3 ranch families on these hills. Every trench, water gate, and emergency livestock corridor was mapped in exact detail. The problem was, half those protections no longer existed on the East Ridge. Vanessa had contractors remove them during her subdivision beautification project last spring. Decorative stone walls replaced drainage cuts. Imported shrubs replaced fire-resistant ground cover. Even worse, the captain recognized the approval signature on the altered permit immediately. It belonged to Deputy Planning Director Carl Benton, Vanessa's brother-in-law. Suddenly those missing county complaints made a lot more sense. Then another firefighter radioed in from the southern block. 2 homes near the clubhouse had already caught fire because emergency crews could not access the old service road Vanessa fenced off for a private walking trail. By 2:30 a.m., my ranch had turned into an evacuation zone. Families packed inside the horse arena wrapped in blankets while deputies used feed tables as emergency check-in stations. You could hear propane tanks popping somewhere deeper in the subdivision every few minutes. Then the county fire captain walked back toward me carrying a soot-covered lockbox recovered from the HOA office near the clubhouse. Inside were permit copies, contractor invoices, and meeting notes Vanessa probably thought would burn with the building. One document stopped the captain cold. It was an internal HOA vote approving removal of my eastern trench despite direct warnings from county wildfire officials. Vanessa had signed the final authorization herself. Worse, attached emails showed they rushed the landscaping project before summer because luxury buyers complained the fire barriers made the neighborhood look too rural. Right then, a deputy pointed toward the western slope where flames suddenly slowed near the old pasture line. The original untouched trench system was still holding. The fire crews finally gained partial control just before sunrise. Smoke still hung over Willow Creek like dirty fog, but the western edge of the subdivision survived because the old pasture trenches kept the flames from jumping farther downhill. That changed the mood fast. Neighbors who spent months complaining about my barn were suddenly standing beside horse trailers thanking deputies for directing them to my property. Then county investigators started walking the eastern ridge with cameras and survey flags. They found buried irrigation pipes crushed under fresh concrete from the HOA landscaping project. One investigator even uncovered charred remains of the original warning markers my father installed decades ago. Vanessa stopped talking completely after that. She just stood near the burned clubhouse staring at the hills while deputies copied files from the recovered HOA lockbox into evidence bags. Then the county fire captain received a radio update that made everyone nearby turn silent. State investigators were officially opening a negligence inquiry against the HOA board. 3 days later, the entire subdivision smelled like wet ash and melted plastic. Cleanup crews filled the streets while insurance adjusters walked house to house carrying tablets and thermal cameras. My ranch became the staging area for county inspectors because half the emergency access routes still connected through my land. That was when the real numbers started coming out. Investigators confirmed the removed firebreak system increased spread conditions across nearly 80 acres. Internal HOA emails showed Vanessa ignored 2 separate wildfire risk assessments because buyers wanted cleaner hillside views without trenches or livestock fencing visible from the model homes. Even worse, one contractor admitted under questioning that the board ordered warning signs removed before county re-inspection. Suddenly residents who used to complain about horse smells were demanding emergency HOA meetings and refund audits. Then a black county SUV rolled onto my property just after noon. The seal on the door belonged to the state attorney's office. The investigators stayed on my ranch for 6 hours. By sunset, county crews had already placed temporary closure signs around the burned subdivision entrance while deputies carried boxes of HOA financial records out of the damaged office. Turns out the wildfire inquiry uncovered something bigger than landscaping violations. The HOA had been quietly redirecting emergency maintenance funds into luxury upgrades for property tours and private events. Money meant for fire prevention never reached the hills. Residents learned that during an emergency town meeting held inside my horse arena because the clubhouse no longer existed. Vanessa tried blaming contractors, weather patterns, even the county itself, but nobody listened anymore. Too many families had watched the flames stop exactly where the original ranch trenches still held the line. A month later, the state revoked the HOA board entirely and placed the area under county oversight. My barn still stands on the ridge today, red paint darkened by smoke, water tanks full, horses calm. Funny thing about old ranch systems. They do not care about appearances. They care about survival.